Captainmidnight.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare. So I think we can all agree that 2018 was a pretty incredible year for Spider-Man. It saw the release of 4 pretty great Spidey stories across 3 different mediums. So today I'm going to be going over each one, what I liked about them, maybe a little bit of what didn't really work for me, and then deciding which one to crown as the best Spider-Man story of last year. But honestly, feel free to disagree, because really, I'm just using this whole which one is best setup as a good excuse to compare them and talk about a couple movies, a comic, and a game that I really loved. Whichever one you think is best, at the end of the day, I'm really just happy that we got all of them. With that being said, let's start with the one that most of us have probably spent the most time with, Spider-Man PS4.
Energize Spider-Man, the motorized web. It pulls, it lifts. The spider light to climb at night.
Peter Parker swung his way onto the PS4 as one of the year's biggest exclusives, and he didn't disappoint. Now that all the DLC is out, I've actually been jumping back into the game. And while I don't really think the DLC is quite up to par with the high storytelling standards set by the main campaign, it's still a great reminder of what made this game so enjoyable. It sets out to remix and rebuild Peter's world, and I think it does a great job of it. It does it by avoiding a lot of the most tired cliches. Instead of Peter worrying about if MJ will discover his secret identity, it pushes their relationship into more complex territory, where they've already been through all that but still don't quite know how to make things work. And then there's also its Doc Ock, which stands toe-to-toe with the best versions of the character. Although I will say that after about 70 hours with the gameplay has gotten a little bit repetitive, and I'm not a big fan of the new enemy types found in the DLC. But overall, it's kinda hard to find a lot of faults with the game, and it seems like there's a pretty big possibility that this is just the beginning of a new Marvel universe opening up in gaming. And if they're all as well written as Spider-Man, I really can't wait.
I feel so distant. I have nobody. Except you, of course. Oh, you're always here for me. You're rock solid.
The PS4 game is about a very well-established and experienced Peter Parker, which I think makes it a good point of comparison for my next subject, the Amazing Spider-Man relaunch. After years and years of Dan Slott writing for ASM, a lot of which, to be honest, I have some pretty huge problems with, it was really great to see Nick Spencer take over the title and go so back to the basics with Peter that the first arc is literally called Back to the Basics. What I really love about Spencer's take is that it manages to make Peter Parker feel like Peter Parker again, without letting him off the hook for the terrible choices he's made in the past few years. Actually, a channel that I'm a big fan of, Godzilla Mendoza, went super in-depth on this a while ago, so I'll put a link to that in the video description. But basically, it's just really refreshing to read a Peter Parker that doesn't act like a petulant jerk all the time. They've dumped all the annoying Peter Parker as a tech CEO stuff, which in my opinion always went against the entire point of the character as an everyman hero, and they're dealing with the consequences of that story. Not to mention, it's just nice to see Mary Jane being a big part of the series again. And much like Spidey PS4, that relationship has quickly become one of the best things about it. Now, if I had one big strike against Spencer's run, it's that I think this last Big Man arc was a little weak. Still, with a promising new story kicking off, I think that might have just been a bump in the road. Overall, Spencer's run has yet to produce anything truly groundbreaking for the character, but it is just a huge breath of fresh air after a decade of Peter Parker being trapped in a comic book written by a writer who never seemed to like him very much. Then there's Infinity War, and honestly I debated including this in the video at all because obviously it's not just a Spider-Man movie. He's just one small part of a giant superhero mosaic. But after thinking about it a little bit, there was just no way I couldn't include it. And it all comes down to that scene. You know the one. Spoilers for a movie you've all already seen. The one where Spider-Man is brutally killed off. I mean, sure, it looks like he's coming back this summer and he'll be fine. But there's still no denying the impact of that moment. Those deaths, and I would even argue Peter's death specifically, are basically the emotional climax of the biggest movie of 2018. In a video about best Spider-Man stories, I think that's worth mentioning. Tom Holland does a lot with what he's given in the movie too. And like Civil War before it, I think he ends up being one of the movie's best elements. But my biggest hesitation in calling this the best Spider-Man story of 2018 comes down to a pretty simple reason. Peter Parker in Infinity War is basically there to move Tony Stark's character arc forward. He's there so when the genocidal snap happens, it hits Tony, and by extension us, as hard as possible. That's not really a criticism, it worked for the structure of the movie that they were making, but I just can't see it as the Spider-Man event of 2018. So then of course there's Into the Spider-Verse, a Spider-Man movie unlike any that had come before it. I've talked about how much I love this movie in a few videos, and come on, you all know it's great, but how does it match up against other interpretations of Spider-Man? Well, it's interesting that Miles Morales is also heavily featured in Spider-Man PS4, and both are kind of a step up from the original Bendis version. Oh, also side tangent, Miles' current comic is really good, like better than anything they'd done with him previously. Anyway, Spider-Verse's Miles definitely gets more time to shine. I wouldn't say any of the changes they make to his character are massive shifts from the original Bendis origin story. If anything, there are a lot of small tweaks, but there's a lot of them, and they're all really smart tweaks. All those little changes really add up and shape Miles into a better character. And this trend of riffing and improving on older stories is seen throughout the movie. It does the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man concepts better than the comics did, and that's on top of improving Miles' origin story.
First, I will destroy your reflection, Spider-Man!
So, okay, if Spider-Man PS4 and Into the Spider-Verse were my two favorite Spider stories of the year, how do I really even compare them? They're obviously very different experiences, and they represent two very different approaches to the character. PS4 is all about going back to what worked in classic Spider-Man stories and kind of streamlining and modernizing it. It's a very sleek and well done version of traditional Spider-Man, and I think that's why I give the slight edge to Spider-Verse. The way that it balances goofy stuff like Spider-Ham with its depressed older take on Peter show that it's a movie willing to take some big risks. I'm glad both exist, but I think the story of Spider-Verse is really going to stick with me longer, no matter how many henchmen I beat up on PlayStation 4. 2018 was also the year that both of Spider-Man's creators, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, passed away, which was really sad but also maybe kind of fitting. Because if 2018 showed anything, it's that there's a real timeless quality to the concept and character that they created together. And that's kind of amazing. So, okay, a constant question I get on Twitter is, hey, I have a YouTube channel, but it's totally stagnant. How can I get more views and subscribers? It's a simple question, but there's a lot of answers to it. And Matt Ballack's How to Grow Your YouTube Channel on Skillshare is a really great guide to them. The course had a lot of stuff that I wish I knew going in, and you can watch it totally for free. And of course, that's not the only learning you can do. Skillshare offers super high quality classes in everything from business to tech and way more. So to get started on a free trial, click on that link in the description or go to skl.sh/CaptainMidnight11.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.